I was going to say my perspective has changed a lot over the years. Like, obviously, being a horse person, I never had insurance until I got Enzo, and even then, I procrastinated until I had that scare at Haugen, and I thought I can't replace Enzo. Like, if something happened to him, I'm screwed. And I had already been looking into it. I was just kind of like dawdling on getting the paperwork done. And now, and then that was prior to my exposure to the insurance industry. And so now it's just interesting, kind of the evolution of my thought process and how I feel about it and the value of having your horse insured. I mean, I feel very differently now than I did 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm wondering if just this whole experience is going to change my outlook as well. I guess for the purposes of this kind of interview and recording, tell me about your profession. Like, tell me about your job and how long you've been doing that.
Yeah, so I was actually in the construction and safety industry for 10 years, and then in 2018 made a change. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do, honestly, and I have a friend through horses that I was talking to. I was actually riding one of her horses for her just a few times a week to help her out, and we were talking about, my career change and what I was thinking I might do. And she was like, wait, we need to talk. And she's been an independent insurance agent for 20 plus years. And so we got together and talked, and, I decided to come on board and work with her. So I started at the end of September of 2018 is when I started working with her and kind of went through all my licensing. And then really kind of went full steam ahead January 2019, working on building my own
You're
book.
so knowledgeable on this topic that surprises me that this is a second career for you. You talk about it as if you've been doing it your whole life.
My previous profession was very technical, and also had pretty big consequences of getting it wrong when you're dealing, I was in the fall protection industry. So it was all safety equipment for people working at heights, and it was very, very strictly regulated and controlled by different organizations and safety boards, and there were standards to comply with and testing. And so I think my brain is kind of hardwired that way. And I've just always, I don't know, if I'm going to talk about something, I love sales, but I can only sell something if I truly understand it from all aspects and that I really believe in it. I don't feel like I can in good conscience tell someone that they should do something if I don't believe it. So that's kind of my take with insurance. I was really ignorant and didn't really know much of anything about insurance. I didn't understand my own homeowner's policy when I got into this. So there's been a lot of studying and a lot of education that has needed to take place and will continue to take place, constantly, to make sure that I can confidently advise people on what they should be doing, whether it's with their horse or their home, auto, their business, kind of everything. So.
And so you are, you're independent, but you are connected to an insurance company, right?
So I'm connected. I work with an agency, an independent agency. So it's made up of several agents like myself, and then we are appointed with different carriers. So we work with, I'm not connected with one particular insurance carrier. We are, I would say, appointed or approved to write and sell a number of different insurance company products. So, for example, aside from the horse equine side of things, for home and auto, most people know of Liberty Mutual or Safeco or Progressive. Allstate, like those are all different carriers. And I would say we have like 3 that we do a lot with, but I have 10 plus carriers that we go to and market to make sure that we have competitive pricing and have a variety of products to offer clients.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so I'm going to jump into kind of the root question of why I called you. I put up a Facebook post of all things to kind of test the waters of what people were doing. And I was looking specifically for supplement companies, since I compare so many supplements for my job. I was looking for supplement companies that provided colic surgery coverage. And I was really shocked to actually find out that many people had both, like the traditional equine mortality morbidity insurance through some of those companies that you just listed off, I'm sure, and then had this colic insurance, and it's called by different things. SmartPack calls it their Colicare. Platinum Performance calls it their colic coverage. Arenas has colic assurance programs. So these are all like trademarked or registered colic insurance companies. And so I was just really surprised to hear that people were doing both. So can you start by telling me the difference between, I guess I just call it like traditional equine insurance. You have a nice horse, it's irreplaceable, you get insurance, but then how does that differ from the colic surgery insurance provided by supplement companies?
Sure. So I'll kind of use Colicare as my basis for answering questions because it's the one I'm familiar with. I'm not familiar with some of the other supplement companies and the products they offer.
Yeah, and just so you know, I looked really closely at all 3 of those that I mentioned and browsed all their terms and conditions online, and they're surprisingly similar.
Okay.
So if we use SmartPack Colicare, like it'll transfer to the others.
Okay. So I know, like for SmartPack, the Colicare program, it's a program that they offer. It's not an insurance policy. So it's not underwritten. You're not submitting an application and being provided a rate based off of your horse's breed, use, age, value. It's just a program. You have to meet eligibility requirements. You have to keep up on the wellness requirements. If you were going to claim on it, you would have to provide proof that you've been doing that, whether it's, regular dental floats, deworming, vaccinations, that sort of thing. But it's not underwritten by an insurance company. So it's really just a program that is being offered by SmartPack. And I'm not totally sure how they fund that or how all of that works, but it's significantly easier. And you would know better than I do on the supplement side. Like, if people are looking to provide a supplement to support their horse's diet and maybe its particular needs, whether it's joint health or, gastric support, if someone's already looking to fill a need and feed a supplement to fill a need, and that supplement simultaneously makes them eligible for some reimbursement for colic surgery, I think it's a no-brainer. It's almost too easy. Like I was talking to someone yesterday, and her family had their horse not insured, enrolled in Colicare, and they used it twice on the same horse. Oh, wow. They had 2 different, cases of colic and colic surgery, and it paid out on both of them. And it was a super easy process. And it does, like Colicare, it pays $10,000, up to $10,000 in colic surgery, where most traditional insurance policies most of them come with $5,000 of emergency colic surgery coverage
Oh, okay.
on a mortality policy. So you get double the reimbursement, and you don't risk or jeopardize the insurability of your horse moving forward. Because anytime you make a claim on your insurance policy, it's going to be more difficult to insure that moving forward, especially if there's history.
That sounds really important. Say that again. I did read for the eligibility of these. I know the Platinum Colic coverage and the Smart Pack Colic Care. Mm-hmm. For to at least to apply the first time for their insurance coverage, you do have to. The horse could not have colicked before. Like, it could not have had 3.
I think it's not in the last 12
episodes.
Months.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I kind of read it as, yeah. I'll look up the terms and conditions real quick just to confirm that. But so you're saying, say that again, because you were saying that it's easier to get than mortality insurance. You said that more.
Well, it's just not. We'll see if I can repeat it. It's easier in that it's not underwritten. Like, you're not being charged a premium based on your horse's value, age, use. To me, if you're already going to feed a supplement or you're looking to feed a supplement to fill a need, and that supplement simultaneously makes you eligible for this reimbursement, then that's why I think it's easier. I mean, you have to meet the eligibility requirements and make sure you're keeping up on the wellness side, wellness care of your horse, but you're not, the money that you're paying for the supplement is also paying for this reimbursement. So it's not a separate charge. And it does, like Colic Care, gives you up to $10,000 in reimbursement, where most mortality policies give you $5,000 in emergency colic surgery coverage.
Okay.
So, and I mean, colic is so common. It's,
yeah.
I mean, I hear of more people losing their horses to colic than anything else. It's
right.
It's constant. So, I think, one, anything you can do to lower your risk of colic is great, but also, if that's like the biggest, and I'm just paraphrasing, I don't have actual studies to back this statement up, but if that's like your biggest risk of losing your horse is due to an episode of colic, or an emergency related to colic, then I think the need for insurance, whether it's this type of reimbursement coverage for colic or even just, your standard mortality or major medical, the need for insurance to me is when if you don't have the disposable funds sitting there that you would without a second be able to pay for a surgery, like colic surgery, or, if you were to tragically lose your horse, if you can't turn around and replace that horse in the case of, death, or, if my horse, colic is super stressful, first of all. So your horse is colicking, you're already panicking about whether or not this is like a mild, does my horse need to be tubed, or do I need to be on the road to a hospital? It's super stressful. And then if you add on top of the fact of like whether or not your horse's life is in danger, can I afford to save my horse's life if it is in danger? That is a difficult decision. And so if you don't have the funds readily available where you don't have to think about that, then I think insurance or a reimbursement program like Colic Care is super important just for that peace of mind, because it's way too common.
Okay, that's really interesting. This is already challenging my own personal beliefs and thoughts about this. But this is good.
And that's just, I mean, to me, like, I I would not want to have that struggle. And I think most horse people, I think there are two things that are true about most horse people. One, most horse people are frugal. Two, most of those frugal tendencies go out the window when it comes to our horses. So it's like this real internal dilemma of like,
that's
you know,
funny.
I mean, I've had horses before where colic surgery would have cost 10 times what I paid for the horse. And it's like, but then there's the emotional aspect and attachment to your horse as well. And like, if you have the ability to save them, then, you know, you have, I feel like most of us have this need or, you know, emotional pull to do whatever we can for our animal.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that's such a good point. And I must say the single best advice I've ever got from a veterinarian came from one of my very best veterinarians that I've ever had down in Corvallis, Oregon. And, you know, I was just out of college and just starting a new career, and I did have a colic scare, and that vet told me, like, after that episode, to have a plan, you know, to be long before your horse ever has a major medical, you know, what is your budget limit? Is the horse a colic candidate or not? And to have really have it set in your mind, you know, or have it written down, whatever you need to really like have that plan ahead of time before you get in that situation where it is an emergency and it's very emotional and scary, and your you know, cognitive thinking maybe goes downhill, and you can't make decisions as well under high stress. So make those decisions beforehand. And I have thought about that advice ever since. You know, here I am like 15 years later, and I think about that every single time I get a new horse. Like, is this horse a colic surgery candidate or not? Yes or no, you know? And to be honest, like even with Stella, you know, my primary horse, up to probably this year, like I've had her 6 years. We've been going preliminary for, you know, this is our third year at prelim. It really wasn't until this year that like my brain switched and I was like, okay, maybe she is a colic surgery candidate because I do have more disposable funds, more secure financially. But it was always no up to very recently. So,
well, I think that's a personal decision for, you know, that everybody has to make, and what, and their threshold for what makes a horse a colic surgery candidate is completely different, you know?
What do you think are some things we should think about when making that decision? I'll preempt that by saying I once had somebody tell me, I think it was an insurance person 5-6 years ago. She told me, you know, if your horse is not worth at least $20,000, like pretty securely worth $20,000, that you should not consider insurance. And I've always held that number as kind of a goalpost or whatever you want to call it. But what do you think about that? Like, should we, at what value is a horse, you know, rationally insurable, or age or level performance? What are some factors that you think horse owners should think about if they're deciding whether a horse is a colic surgery candidate or not?
Colic surgery candidate or worth insuring?
Worth insuring.
Like,
sorry,
in general.
Worth insuring. In general, yeah.
Well, I think there's a big personal, like, financial piece to that. So, I mean, I think $20,000 is probably like a fair, just random number to throw out as like a benchmark. But, you know, for some people, like for a long time, I got into horses later. I didn't grow up around horses, didn't have access to that. And everything that I've done with horses has been on my own. Whether it was as a young adult, you know, in high school, not in high school, I was a kid, but out of high school. And so like my funds for horses was really limited, and to the point where, I mean, my own like standard of living was questionable, so that I could afford my horse.
Exactly.
And so
I always told myself I would not go in debt for major medical with my horse, as long as, like, if I always set aside a savings account. I usually had about $10,000 like in a savings account, and I was like, okay, like that is my max. I will, what I have in that account, I will use to save my horse, but I won't go in debt for my horse.
Right.
How I rationalized it.
Well, and this is like, I mean, just to have a horse and pay board and my rent, like when I'm out of high school, that was challenging. So the horses that I had access to, I was definitely like going to the Enumclaw Sales Pavilion for their Saturday auction, or looking at, off the track thoroughbreds, like very inexpensive horses that I could put time and work into, on this personal journey. So, and not to say that those horses' lives aren't worth saving, but I would not spend more, like, I'm not going to spend the money on colic surgery at the time, I should say, where I was at in life. I couldn't afford to insure them. They probably weren't worth insuring because they weren't worth any. I mean, you have to insure, like for major medical surgical coverage, you have to insure the horse with a mortality limit at least equal to what you're asking for in major medical. And the horse has to be worth that. So, if you want $10,000 in major medical coverage, you have to insure the horse's mortality limit for $10,000. And I had a lot of horses that weren't worth that. So insurance was never like a thought or an option for me. And I'm just using myself as an example because I feel like I've kind of gone through
I think
a range
using
of
ourselves. Yeah, I think using ourselves as examples is perfect because, I always say, me personally, I am exactly the average horse owner. I've got 4 horses, 5 acres, 3 or 4 horse shows a year. They are lots of lessons, shelves and shelves of training books, like, a budget that is limited. I feel like me especially, and you probably feel the same, we're very much the average horse owner. Sure.
Yeah. It's and all those decisions are like thought out. It's not just on a whim, do it. Like so for me, like I would say minimum, like absolute, like I would not insure a horse that was worth less than $10,000, me personally.
Okay.
I think, probably the $20,000 range, that's when I don't know about you, but if I spend $20,000 on a horse, if I buy a new horse and spend $20,000 and something were to happen to it, unexpectedly on any given day, especially if it was pretty quick, I couldn't turn around and go write another $20,000 check to replace that horse. So you not only have the emotional side of losing your animal, but also, I mean, horses are expensive. They're expensive to buy. They're expensive to care for. And so I think that insurance is really a peace of mind. It's just like your other insurance. You try not to use it. You hope you never have to use it. And you don't want to constantly submit claims for every little teeny thing. But you want it there should you need it. And so, like, I think about my current horse, Enzo. He was a gift, and I am incredibly blessed to have gotten the opportunity to buy him when I did, and through a friend and a connection. So I feel like, I bought him for a fraction of his value. So even though the purchase price was maybe not where I would think this horse, his value and what my mortality limit is significantly higher than his purchase price. And then you have to justify that. But I thought I couldn't turn around and replace him. Like if I just went out to buy a horse like Enzo, I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford it then, and I probably couldn't afford it now. So I'm like, I'm going to insure him because his value and his worth is, to me, it's significant, and it's more than I would be willing, even if I had like the money just sitting there, I would have a hard time justifying writing a check for that. I just, I'm cheap. So
he is a very nice horse.
I just like I couldn't do that. So
yep. I'm sure. A lot of our friends are in the same boat. Okay, let me shift gears.
That's worth protecting.
Yeah. Let me shift gears a little bit and just ask you about standard mortality policies, major medical, surgical, the stuff that you sell through your carriers. What should horse owners look for from a provider when purchasing that sort of equine insurance? Maybe some top three things.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that in general, most of the carriers, from like mortality policy standpoint, it's very, very similar. So there's a couple things, maybe to look for specifically on your policy, just in how they off the shelf, how that policy comes worded. So I would say that the number one thing with any insurance policy, equine or otherwise, is that people need to read their insurance policies or have someone like an agent that they work with that is reading their policy and can explain it to them, because that your insurance policy is a legally binding contract, and it explains how it basically says, in exchange for paying a premium, this is what we will provide. But these are all the things, all the rules you have to follow and all the conditions that you have to meet for us to pay. And so they
really know exactly what your requirements are.
Sure, and especially like with equine coverage, there are you're dealing with the loss of your horse or a major medical situation, and you're so in the moment dealing with that situation, you're probably not thinking about the fact of like, I need to read my insurance policy and know how many days I have to report this to my insurance company. So I think when no one wants to read an insurance policy anyway. It's super boring. So that's not like light fun reading for anybody, but it's really, really important that you either read your policy or you have someone you trust that has read your policy and can explain it to you and walk you through or guide you in how to use it. So, for example, with a mortality policy, it covers humane destruction, putting a horse down in certain instances if that's needed, but a vet has to sign off on that. The insurance company has to agree to it. So it's not like you can just make that decision, have your horse put down, and then file a claim. Or, let's say the mortality is caused, I was just looking at different policies last night. Let's say the mortality claim is associated with like gelding a horse or, I want to say spaying, but a surgery related to that. That's only a covered cause of loss on a mortality policy if the insurance company knows about that surgery ahead of time and has pre-authorized it. So those are important things for people to know. Or like, let's say you have a $20,000 mortality limit on your horse. I shouldn't say all, but a lot of standard insurance policies, if you actually look at the wording, the way they come off the shelf is that it pays a fair, and this is just like your car, but people don't think about it this way. The policy pays a fair market value for your horse up to the mortality limit you have listed on your policy. So let's say, you have a mortality limit of $20,000 and fair market value on your horse is 15, your policy is going to pay you 15, not the 20. But on the flip side, your horse is in the current market conditions worth $30,000. It's going to pay you the max listed on the schedule, which is $20,000. So it's not an agreed or stated value policy, right, unless that's added by endorsement. And a lot of them do endorse the policy to include that. Like mine, for example, the standard policy, like the beginning of the policy, explains all that, how it pays in a loss and that it pays fair market value. But then I have an agreed value endorsement attached that says that previous wording is replaced and that they'll pay the agreed value of my horse, which is the scheduled mortality limit. So those are just a couple examples of things that I think people need to understand. And, you know, the timeline, like if you have a claim, you have a certain window that you have to report that claim to the insurance company for it to pay. So understanding that's really important.
So when you say you've used the term off the shelf a couple of times, so are you saying like these insurance carriers have these prepackaged, insurance policies, and that but they can be adapted for individual needs? Maybe I'm hearing you say that they can be amended in certain ways or added on to.
Insurance carriers have their policy, they call them forms. So they have their policy forms, and it would be like the forms are all at the bottom of the page. They're numbered. So they have like standard policy forms that are issued with their verbiage and wording. But then endorsements are basically forms that are added that amend that coverage. So typically an endorsement can either add coverage, enhance it, and give you something better than the kind of standard policy form, or it can be an exclusionary endorsement where it's taking coverage away. So let's say, for example, like major medical surgical coverage, that's an endorsement that's added on to a mortality policy. It's not a separate policy. It's just an endorsement that enhances and adds coverage to your policy. Let's say you have, again, I'll use myself as an example. My horse had an injury last summer, and it was the first time I've ever submitted a claim on his insurance, but I did that, and it's pretty common that for the next policy year, at least that next year, what you submitted a claim on is going to be excluded. So, or you could even use ulcers for an example. Like ulcers, typically, if you submit a claim related to ulcer treatment, there are a couple of requirements to be able to do that. They'll exclude ulcers for the next policy term, the next year. And part of the reason why they do that is to make sure that you have identified the cause and that you're managing it and that it's not a constant problem you're fighting. Like if you're not addressing the issue and then you're constantly every year submitting ulcer claims, that's what they're trying to avoid. So they'll typically exclude it for a year, and then once you've been, ulcer free for a year, then they would take that exclusion off of your policy. So endorsements are used to either give you more coverage or take some coverage away or limit it, for a period of time. Or so that's how that works.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Ulcers are so ubiquitous. That'd be a really good part of your insurance policy to look into and understand.
Yeah,
I pretty much treat all my clients' horses as if they had it.
What was that?
Yeah, sorry. Well, it's so ubiquitous that I pretty much address ulcers with every single client I talk to. If they're showing, taking their horse off the property, training their horse at all, we deal with ulcers at some point in their life. That's what research has shown. Even the horses that get left behind that don't go to the horse show can have enough stress to cause ulcers. So it's shocking how prevalent it is in modern horse management.
Definitely. So, and it's like if you, when you take your horse to a off property or to a clinic or a show, give your horse a tube of ulcer guard, I mean, that's not the type of like thing you're going to be submitting. But if you have a major case, I had a client that bought a horse, and within a week or two, the horse that she bought and the horse she had at home were night and day different. Like, couldn't even handle the horse. Just really kind of crazy how much it changed when it got to her place. And come to find out, there was a major case of ulcers and other things going on. So in that case, like if you want to submit it, and I'll just explain this since it is so common, if you want to submit ulcer treatment to your insurance company, you have to, one, diagnose with a scope that it is in fact ulcers, run a full treatment, and then have another scope post-treatment showing that the ulcers are gone or that it's been resolved. But I've had a lot of people ask me like, well, my trainer told me not to submit a claim because they said I'll get canceled next year or my insurance won't renew, or, and that, I've never had that experience. I've never had a client have that experience. I think, and that's going back to your question, I kind of got on a tangent, what things to look for. I think working with someone, either working with an agent that you know and trust, or two, feeling really comfortable with the customer service experience you have with your carrier, because people have these horror stories or, nightmare insurance experiences that give them a really bad taste in their mouth about, especially equine insurance. Like, I spent all this money and then this is the way they treat me, or they non-renew me for this or that. And so I think if you, especially when you're trying to, let's say, get an insurance quote, I think all of those, any interaction you have with an insurance company prior to a claim is really important and tells you what they're like to work with as a company. Like if I'm dealing with someone and they're really hard to get a quote out of, or they're just difficult to work with, I think, I'm trying to give you my money. What are you going to be like when I need you to give me money for a claim? Like, if it's this difficult now, then I don't want to know what it's going to be like later. So those are other things, like I said, either having an agent that you trust, or that is doing that for you and kind of weeding out the right fit, or, trusting your gut in the customer service experience you have in your interactions with the carrier is really important to me, to feel comfortable that they're going to be there really, and they're going to take care of me should I need it.
Okay. Last question about the standard mortality. I want to compare the cost to the Colic coverage from supplement companies. I sat down and calculated what I would pay for my horse each year to use one of these products. I did use some of the higher end products with Platinum and Smart Pack because I wanted joint supplementation in it. And I calculated that I would spend anywhere from $1,700 to over $4,000 per year on these supplements in order to qualify for their Colic insurance coverage. So just to compare a little bit, and I understand obviously they're not the exact same thing, but for Stella, let's just use her as an example, or your horse if you don't mind. What would we expect to pay annually for standard mortality policy, major medical, surgical, kind of the standard that you recommend?
Sure. So, and it varies a little bit depending on state, breed, age, all of those things. But let's just say,
and state too. That's interesting.
Yeah, the ratings in different states, uses like eventing, the rating is higher on a horse that's used for eventing than a horse that's used for dressage. They add a surcharge, So those are all things that affect that. But let's just say a horse with like a $25,000 or $30,000 value, I would say ballpark, the mortality piece of the coverage is probably going to be in that $1,200 to $1,300 a year, with a total policy cost. If you were to add $10,000 in major medical or surgical coverage, the total policy premium in a year would be somewhere between $1,700 and $1,900, just kind of ballpark. So that's the mortality plus the $10,000 in major medical. So that's giving you the mortality limit, $5,000. Typically, most carriers include $5,000 of emergency equine or emergency colic surgery coverage. And then your major medical, which I think if you're going to have a mortality policy, I would always, to me, I would always add major medical in some form, even if it's $5,000, because the chances of us needing to use that is a lot higher than the mortality side of it. So,
okay.
I just think it's like a, good peace of mind. Again, I'll use myself as an example. If I'm already paying, let's just say $1,200 a year to have the mortality coverage, for an extra $500 or $600 a year to have $10,000 that I can pull from, whether it's for stem cells or shockwave therapy or things that I probably wouldn't consider just because there's that peace of mind that should I need it, I have more options when it comes to treatment and things that give my horse a better chance of fully recovering.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, like $10,000 is worth $500 a year, knowing that I have it.
Cool. Okay. So just to make sure I got this right, so for this kind of average standard horse worth about $20,000 to $25,000, competing, whatnot, you'd spend about $1,200 to $1,300 a year for standard mortality, plus another $500 to $600 for $10,000 worth of coverage for major medical and surgical. And inside that is $5,000 in coverage for emergency colic surgery. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, most carriers, the mortality, so your insurance policy is a mortality policy. The major medical is just an add-on. Like I said, it's an endorsement that you can add it onto your mortality policy. But most insurance carriers provide $5,000 in emergency colic surgery coverage with the mortality policy at no charge. It's just included.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
They do have, just like the major medical surgical as an add-on coverage, they do have equine colic. I don't know what I should call it coverage, but it's another endorsement where basically you can add on one particular carrier that we work with, their equine colic supplement that you can add on gives you up to $3,000 in other kind of medical expenses related to a colic episode. So both Colic Care or the supplement colic programs and the $5,000 reimbursement that's included on your mortality policy, those are related to emergency colic surgery. So some carriers also provide like an add-on coverage where you can pay and it will give you, up to $3,000 or up to, whatever their limit is for other, basically it's medical expenses related to colic, but not surgery. So it's almost like major medical specifically for colic. I don't have anyone that has added that or felt that that was necessary in addition to their major medical. But it's there if somebody wanted it. Again, I think insurance is important, but I think I'm not going to pay for all these little things that I wouldn't use. So like if my horse or if my vet comes out and tubes my horse, I'm not submitting that to my insurance company. Like it's not worth it.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
You probably won't even hit your deductible, or you'd be right at that deductible threshold. even if I drive up to Pilchuck and I have them, look at my horse and, if you're on the fence of whether or not it's an issue, I'm only submitting a claim to my insurance company if I need to.
Got it. And deductible, that's another good thing to discuss. So what would be a standard, regular deductible for this average standard horse we keep referring to?
Sure. It depends again on I'll use on the major medical because that's where most people have to pay a deductible. But it's typically $400 to $500, just depending on the limit that you have.
Okay.
You do have to watch out. Some carriers have a copay, which I've learned this the hard way. So your deductible. You have your deductible. But then some carriers also have a copay. So you might pay your $500 deductible, submit your claim, and then they reimburse you minus your 40% copay. So they're only paying, a little over half. And you can, again, endorse that off by paying more premium, but that's a carrier-specific thing. That's another thing to look out for is just understanding your policy, what you're paying for. And that's a good example, like if you're comparing prices between companies, if one is a few $100s less than the other and everything else that you've quoted is apples to apples, like on an equine policy, that's where I would look is some of those, the fine print of the deductible. Is there a copay that applies that would explain that price difference?
Gosh, this is all just really stressing your first two pieces of advice, but you really need to know the requirements and timelines and how to use this insurance by working with an agent that you really, really trust and that has a really good grasp on the industry.
Yeah, or be
you
willing
have personal
to sit and read.
experience too. So. Wow,
or be willing to sit there and read your policy and understand it. Like your vet said before, you're in that situation. Like I think,
yes. Oops, you still there?
Oh, yep. Sorry, I'm here.
There you are. Lost you for a second. Ooh. And then I almost lost my coffee in my lap.
I was just kind of looking at my notes to see if there was something else that I was going to comment. I was looking at your questions last night, so I was trying to think if there was anything else that I wanted to add in there. But I think on the Colic programs offered by supplement companies, that's the nice thing is that a lot of people that you mentioned do have both, and typically the supplement company would act as like the primary coverage. They would pay first, and then if there was a surplus, then you would submit it to your insurance company after that. But again, Colicare, you could potentially have, not that you would want to, but that's something you could potentially use that multiple times, where if you're submitting claims to your insurance company, they're not just going to flat out like cancel or non-renew you for submitting a claim, but the claims that you do submit to them can affect your horse's insurability moving forward. So you do want to weigh that, and if you submit a bunch of Colic claims to your insurance company, they may cancel you, or Colic's going to be excluded, or it could be harder if you're looking to switch to a different carrier in the future. It could be harder to get your horse insured if you have a long history of claims. And the other, I would say, important thing, and this is hard for a lot of horse owners to accept, and I know that in a couple of years I'm going to be in this boat too, is that insurance companies have limits on the age of a horse that they'll insure. So a lot of them, it's 15 years of age, or If you get above that, they will only provide, let's say they have like a max mortality limit that they'll provide on a horse that's over 15, where Colic Care doesn't have an upper age limit. So they'll provide that $10,000 in colic reimbursement for a 20-year-old horse if it's eligible and you're keeping up on the wellness requirements. So that's another, I would say, thing to be mindful of. And there are a lot of horses, like there are a lot of upper level horses that are over 15 years of age.
Yeah.
And they're worth their weight in gold. Like you could have prelim packers or, even think about like probably the most valuable horse out there. This actually isn't really true, but for a lot of people, for the average horse owner,
I'm with you.
Is like a 15-year-old or maybe plus, like training level packer that's safe for kids. Like
totally. That family horse that's been there, done that.
Yeah.
That's safe for your family and your kids to ride. Yeah. Worth their weight in gold.
But has the talent and the experience and the ability to teach their kids and still get them out to do things. Those horses are, worth their weight. So, I mean, think again about fair market value, and you might have a horse that you could go sell for $20,000-$25,000, but it may not be insurable anymore because of its age.
That's interesting.
So, or, I've heard of people, I haven't had this personal experience, but I've heard of people that have, an advanced level horse that is really valuable. Like you could turn around and sell that horse for a lot of money, but because of their age, one insurance company may only insure it up to, a value that's a fraction of what their fair market value is. So those are things that are frustrating for horse owners. And it's kind of unfair, but again, insurance, they're in the game. They're really gambling.
Of making
they have
money.
To weigh the risk. Well, I mean, it's all like a game of, they have formulas and statistics and big pools of numbers that they use to come up with their rating, where they weigh their risk of the chance of something happening to that horse. And as a horse gets older, the chances of them having to pay out on a claim increases. So, they don't, if the chance or if the likelihood of a horse, goes up significantly, where it's a lot more likely that they're going to have to pay out a $50,000 mortality claim, they don't want that. And that's why they put some of those restrictions in place. It's just to limit their losses.
Oh, of course, yeah. It makes sense from their CEO's point of view, for sure.
Yeah, but, again, especially with animals, there's an emotional, component, and so it's hard to look at it purely objectively when you have this, especially we all think, on most days we all think our horses are like, or our animals, they're, I would say we have a completely different non-objective view of them, where we think, but he's worth this,
of course.
He's worth 10 times what I have, or I've paid for 10 years, I've paid this premium, and now they're going to limit coverage. It's really hard to accept that.
Well, you've done it. You've definitely shifted my perspective on colic insurance. From supplement companies, it sounds like they're filling a really useful niche and providing insurance and coverage for horses that might not be able to get it because of age or other factors at really very little risk, it sounds like. You just have the cost of the supplement in that. But it's almost like it almost feels like a safer bet than some of the standard mortality policies, even though you do pay more. You do pay more, right? Like it sounds like that would be from
Well,
what little math and numbers I've punched, you pay equal to or a little bit more to feed the supplement.
Yeah, especially depending on your horse's value. That could definitely be true. But I guess, are you going to pay a supplement like that anyway to support? I mean, that's where
right.
And you would know, again, the value or usefulness or effectiveness of those supplements better than I do on the nutrition side. But
that's where I really
because because it's easy, and I feel like I'm doing something to support my horse. Some horses are really high maintenance and require a lot of maintenance or a lot of help and support. And some horses, like I've always called Enzo my cockroach horse, because he literally, like, nothing phases him. He's very stoic. He doesn't require a lot. But I feel like I should, especially because of, his use and, competing and what we were doing. I thought I really should support him in some way and give him something, even if it's preventative, just to help him out a little bit, whether it's, joints or, he did get really, agitated and I felt like he struggled with ulcers when we went to shows, especially in the beginning. So, and I've had colic care before with other more high maintenance horses. So I've done the Smart Packs, and I just think it's easy, it's low risk, and it's just a really good peace of mind. And I was already going to give him a supplement anyway. And since I'm not equine nutrition guru like you, where I'm not reading feed labels. I do now, actually, a little bit more, thanks to your information. But, I'm not spending the hours and hours and hours to do all the research and put together a feed program that is, like, laser focused on my needs. I just, like most people aren't reading insurance policies all day long. So it's like I was going to spend the money on some sort of feed or supplement anyway. Right. Why wouldn't I click and roll and get $10,000 in reimbursement should I need it? Right. And fortunately, knock on wood, I've never had to use it. So,
yeah. Well, with so many things with horses, it's really not black and white. When I started this research a few days ago, and boy, have I gone down the rabbit hole. I've got spreadsheets. I've got talking to experts.
That sort of thing.
Oh yeah, it's bad. I've been in front of my computer a lot the last few days, and I thought I would come out the other end of this with like a really black and white answer. I was looking for validation of my long-held belief that that this stuff was a scam. And actually, the more I'm learning about it, the more I'm like, this is a really good option. Maybe not for me right now, because I prefer to self-insure, but it could be a really good option for my clients, and something to like nutrition. Nutrition is what we feed our horses is not always about nutrition.
Right.
What we feed our horses ends up, and I know that's going to confuse some people, but when I consult day in, day out, I feel like 50% of what people choose to feed their horses is based on nutrition, the number, the nutrients that they need. And the other 50% of the decision is really like all these other personal factors, like cost and how easy is it to get, and can you get colic insurance, and how does that fit into your boarding facility or how you feed at home or your values for nutrition to yourself. Like there's so many other factors in what we choose, to provide our horse. Yep. It's not always nutrient related, which is really interesting, and we never talk about that. But it's all part of choosing. All of this that we're talking about is part of choosing a good nutrition plan that works for your horse long term, Like when I compared these products, we haven't talked about the third one that I looked into, which is Arenas. Like Arenas Animal Health has this colic assurance program. I went through the process of applying for each of these just to see what the process was like. And I did apply for this for a couple of them, and the Arenas colic assurance program application was a lot more involved, and it was a little frustrating because I had to provide pictures and records and blah, blah, blah. But it is like just a digestive aid supplement. It doesn't try to be everything like Platinum and Smart Pack products do, which drives me insane. It's kind of it's just a focused digestive aid. And so I'm like, this could actually be a really valuable product that people could add on to, because, I recommend a lot of digestive aid products anyway. Like it might be a really good option. But I do struggle a lot with the Platinum and Smart Pack products because they're in this arms race to like add more stuff to their products, like the Smart Pack Combo Ultimate Pellet. The ingredients list is insane. And so it's so long. It's just ridiculous how many products they're trying to throw into 1 2-ounce scoop, And when I punch the numbers, I get so frustrated with these companies
to make a difference.
Exactly. Like the numbers for, they really focus heavily on like the joint and the joint stuff. And there's good numbers there, but some of the other nutraceuticals in there are just in pathetic amounts because they're trying to be everything in one, and that drives me crazy. It's like there's really not a lot of value nutritionally in these products, but yeah, I do like the Arenas Animal Health one. That one's kind of coming out on top for me, but yeah.
Well, and I think
I hadn't either.
A dietary, if there's a supplement that is useful to you and your horse and in filling a need, like you said, you like digestive aids anyway, it lowers your horse's risk of colicking, which is really common anyway, and it provides some peace of mind should your horse colic, and all of them are really clear in saying that feeding these products or being in this, following our guidelines doesn't mean your horse isn't going to colic, but it does, like if you're taking these steps and your horse is in routine, veterinary care, you're staying on top of all your wellness stuff and managing your horse's care the way you should, and then you still have an episode of colic, then you have this peace of mind. I don't know. I think that's really, really good just backup for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think these supplement companies on some level they're a little too confident that their product is going to actually prevent colic. That's how it's marketed to us. And I think, well, you know me, I'm an extreme skeptic, and I'm really not convinced that these products will ever actually prevent colic. I've had plenty of clients where their horses were on digestive aids and they still colic. Colic is so multifaceted. There's so many different types of colic. Is a 2-ounce scoop of something really going to prevent colic? I think maybe for some horses, but not the majority, right? It's not going to prevent colic for the majority. So I'm really weighing all that skepticism, and it's because I read the peer-reviewed journal articles. I study what has been studied about these supplements, and so I do have a very strong, healthy dose of skepticism here. But there could actually be value in feeding these supplements simply for the insurance, which is so interesting. That's so interesting.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to digest all this.
It's just colic, but, it's, again, if it's one of the most common.
Colic surgery.
Yes. So it is very specific on what it would provide, where an insurance policy is a little more well-rounded or comprehensive. But it's I think it does give horse owners another option, an alternative option, and it does fill a niche in some ways. Maybe horses' age or value or things, provide coverage for a horse that otherwise someone wouldn't consider insuring.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, that's fabulous. Well, let's end there, Amy. I recommend the crap out of you to anybody looking for insurance.
Which I really appreciate. Thank you.
The purpose of anybody listening to this, if they've lasted the entire hour plus we've been talking, can you tell us how to get a hold of you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I have, our website has a plethora of information on the services that we offer, and that's Carlson AssociatesINS.com.
Okay.
But I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. My cell phone is probably the best way to get a hold of me. I'm always available, and my phone number is 253-797-3992. And I don't know if there's a good way that I could share, like a contact card or give you my business card or something that we can post so people have it.
I'm gonna start by writing up an article about all this, and I'll post it on Facebook, and I'll put at the bottom your contact info.
Okay,
but I'm on the Carlson Associates Independent Insurance Advisors website right now, and I'll share that link on the article as well.
Oh, thank you. That's what I was. I admire so much how active you are, whether it's on social media or doing, Zoom meetings or blog posts. It's like you are so good about doing all the things that make me want to curl in a ball. Like I just can't get myself to do it. So when you asked me if I was
vice versa.
I thought this is like such a good opportunity because you are so good about doing this, and I would never take it upon myself to do an interview and post it on the internet. I just I can't get myself to put myself out there like that. So if I can share, any sort of information on insurance that is useful or valuable to someone or helps them on their own personal, journey with their horse, then I am absolutely happy to do it.
Well, from personal experience, you've helped me tremendously. So thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing. I hope this new app that I downloaded actually recorded this, because I think this could be amazingly valuable for people. But I'll let you know, Amy. I have a friend coming over. We're going to go trail ride, do some hill climbs this morning, so I got to run.
Oh,
but
awesome.
We'll stay in touch. I'll let you know how this goes.
Okay, thanks so much, Natalie.